Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the WMMA6 Developers Journal. Um, we're rolling into uh, days 11 through 13, and I'm so happy to say I'm feeling better, and we are so back, baby. These next entries keep pushing the fight engine, the realism, and the overall simulation depth even further. We're past the halfway point now, and the momentum is only picking up. The kind of stretch where the changes start stacking together, and you really start to see how different WMMA6 is from anything that came before it. So let's settle in. Let's get comfortable. Whether that is you're listening to this while going to bed, or listening to this while working, or maybe you're just chilling at home. Uh, and excited to hear another deep dive into the developer's journal. Might be that too. Whatever the case may be, whether it's day or night, or you're listening to this at 2 a.m. for whatever reason, that's up to you. But I told you guys I wasn't feeling well, and now I'm back. So let's get into it, shall we? For those who are new to the breakdowns, I first of all want to say this is what Adam Ryland posted first of all. Welcome to the WMMA6 Developers Journal. For those who haven't been with us for previous versions, the purpose of the journal is to reveal all the new features and modifications that will appear in any game so that you know what to expect before the release. There will be a new entry every weekday for the next 4 weeks. This was posted in July 27th. So next Friday is when the last journal entry is. And there is an FAQ, and there's plenty of other entries that I talked about as well. Take a look at those videos if you would like to. I've made plenty of the previous videos that are heading into that. So without any further ado, let's get into the first one here, the 61 skill display. This is the way a fighter's skills are presented, and it has been changed. Now using numbers rather than a text description. Like in TEW, what you see will depend on scouting levels, so it may be an exact number or a range, for example, 50 to 70. This makes presenting skill levels more intuitive, makes it easier to have a fighter's entire skill set on screen at the same time, and therefore you get a sense for their quality in a single glance. And it opens up the ability for the various search facilities to be upgraded to be more useful and precise. I do think this is a nice upgrade. This is just mostly a change on how it's presented, but I think it's a nice change because I know plenty of people like me who play Total Extreme Wrestling, but also play World of Mixed Martial Arts. So I think having that there is kind of a nice thing. That way you don't, but it's not too much of the same thing to a point where it feels like you're playing the same game at the same time is what I'm getting at here, which is nice. It is nice. And it also is nice that we'll be able to have a little bit more of an understanding of how the fighters' skills are being presented or displayed. That way, new players and experienced players alike can easily figure out, oh, this fighter has good takedown defense, or this fighter has terrible close range clinching. So I think it's a nice addition. It's kind of more of a quality of life upgrade in my opinion, but you could argue it's an actual um like uh you could argue it's more than just a quality of life upgrade too. You could argue it's like an actual update onto the skill set too. But I personally believe it's mostly a quality of life upgrade, which there's nothing wrong with that. But that's kind of all there really is to it. It just changes the way skills are displayed. Now we've got on number 62 the turn to database feature. The options screen now has a turn to database button that converts a save game into a usable database. This brings the series in line with Total Extreme Wrestling and makes it easier to create new content. Yes, 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 yes. We've been asking for this for so long now. It's finally happening. We are finally going to be able to convert a save game into a usable database for World of Mixed Martial Arts. This is huge because in the previous games, we weren't able to do that. You could only look at the data into like a Microsoft Access folder, but the database wasn't usable. But now this changes everything. There are a lot of people who end up decluttering a lot of the database, the larger saves and larger universes. For example, getting rid of retired fighters or deceased characters or companies that have closed out for whatever reason. But now we don't have to worry about that. And it's a lot more intuitive. And it's a lot less intuitive. And a lot less annoying and time consuming. So, yeah, it definitely would make it easier to create new content as well. Because if you're wanting to copy a save game to not even necessarily to continue a universe, but to make changes to the modern, to like for example the modern world database, like maybe there's some new UFC fighters that came into play, and they pop up in the save game, but not in the actual database for whatever reason. Then you could just convert that into a usable database, tweak things up from there, and then just go from there, from that save game, which is great. So that is something I've been wanting to, and it's finally happening. Thank God. Looks like number 63 is more of a cosmetic change, renaming the website. By request, the name of the in-game website, Blurcat by default, can now be changed at the database level. This is useful for those creating real-world databases who want to get as much realism as possible. Note that this only affects any textual reference to the website, such as in-generated text internet stories, which does not actually affect the background skin that you see in the game. If you want that to change, you'd naturally have to do some separate graphical work. So that is a little bit of a bummer on the having to do a little bit of some graphic work, but I think it's a nice cosmetic change. It's not really anything else. It's just kind of a cosmetic change to add a little bit more of a look into whatever database you're doing. I'm not even sure if I'll end up actually using this feature. I might, but probably not, because I'm okay with Blur Cat. Anyways, it doesn't really bother me. But the more you can change, the more control a player has, the better. So it is a nice change. It is a nice addition. It's a nice feature for anybody that wants to change the name of the in-game website. But it's nothing incredible. It's nothing spectacular by any means. It's just kind of an addition. It's merely just cosmetic. That's all there really is to it. And that's okay. But we're just going to move on from there. Number 64, higher numbering. By request from several database makers, the highest possible number used in event and TV show numbering is now 50,000 rather than 9,999. This is way over. This is like this is over. This is over. Oh, sorry. I got to do some mental math real quick. I got to do some not so mental math real quick. That this is barely over 5 times as much as what we could normally do in WMMA5. Again, a little bit more of a cosmetic change, a little bit of a quality of life upgrade too, if you want to put it that way too, because some people, again with the larger saves, may have gone to 9,999 somehow. Now they don't have to worry about it because they can keep it on going to 50,000. Imagine a UFC 50,000 in what? In what? 5,026? Like, will the UFC even exist by then? Probably not, but we'll never know because we'll all be dead most likely. But anyways, that's I'm getting sidetracked. It's a nice addition, but again, it's nothing too crazy. But it is a nice addition. I am surprised by the amount of the increase it is. I figured it would just be like, I don't know, 20,000, which still would have been a pretty solid upgrade because that's 11,000 more than before. But we got just a bit, just 5 more over 5 times as much as we normally are able to do. You saw the math. 9,999 times 5 is 49,995. 5 more of that. And It's just crazy, man. But we're going to move on to 65. Broadcaster controls. A new section has been added to the user's office. Your broadcasters. This allows the user to edit, upgrade, or close a company-owned broadcaster. Previously, this required the user to go to the editor and mess with it. This is great. Very much needed quality of life upgrade here. It was very tedious and time consuming because you had to do all the math to take out how much money you were spending on upgrading the range and just it was very much a hassle. But now you don't have to go. But now there's a whole section for it, which is great. This is pretty in line to how Total Extreme Wrestling does their company-owned broadcasters. So if you play TEW, you'll know what's going on here. If you don't, that's okay too. But I explained it to you. You'll be able to edit the name of the company-owned broadcaster. You'll be able to edit the description, the logo. At least there might be more you can edit, but you could also upgrade how much is how much is being covered. Like for example, maybe America is small in its coverage. You could upgrade that from small to medium, or maybe Mexico does not have any coverage at all, and you could change that over to insignificant to give it some kind of coverage as well. And now you could close it instead of having to press a whole bunch of other buttons and hope for the best in the editor. So this is a very, very, very nice upgrade. And now number 66, team logos. The team logos now have their own dedicated subfolder within pictures, making things easier to organize for database and graphics makers. So a nice addition for people that mess with the picture folders. And previously, as you guys might be able to make out of context with this, you kind of had to search along the logos side of things. There wasn't a folder for the team logos, and some of the databases had lots of teams. Like the Modern World database that I have in WMMA6 has almost 2,000 different teams, I think, or something like that. And a lot of them have pictures. So it'll be nice to be able to look at the team logos section now. I don't typically mess with the pictures folders, but it's a nice addition for those who do mess with that kind of stuff. Now we got for forbidden numbers, we've got default images. To bring the game in line with Total Extreme Wrestling, each picture pack can now have its own copies of many of the common default images that appear in the skins folder. This allows the aesthetics of the current skin to be overwritten without requiring the player to download and use separate skins for each database. So this is very nice. I'm very happy that they are doing this. I kind of hope they end up revealing to have some sort of backdrop like TEW9 has, so that way we can see what company they're signed to and all that stuff too, like whatever fighter is signed to. But I'm very happy with this addition as well. And now we've got some button changes for number 68 to make things more user friendly and to bring the game in line with TEW. Sorry, guys. Like shortlisting, scouting, etc., will change their text and or color to signify their current status. For example, the scouting button will turn red and use the text "Stop Scouting" if the highlighted fighter is already being scouted. Previously, you wouldn't really have any visual indication and would just have to click the button to find out if they're being scouted or not, or they're being shortlisted, or whatever the case may be. A nice quality of life upgrade, but also cosmetic upgrade too. Because sometimes people forget if they shortlisted a fighter or if they're scouting a fighter or whatever the case may be. So I think it's great that they're doing this, because now if we forget, it's okay, because there will be some sort of display that shows that they're being scouted or that they're being shortlisted or that they're not being scouted or being shortlisted. So having some sort of visual indication makes things a lot easier and is very helpful if we're trying to find out something. So this is a nice addition as well. Moving on to number 69. Nice numbers. Easier text input. Wherever possible, scroll/slider bars. Let me drink my red, white, and blue ass monster for a second. Okay. Whereas possible, scroll/slider bars have been replaced with text box input to make it significantly quicker for database makers and users to fill things in. Additionally, all text boxes now auto-highlight their contents when selected to further speed up text input. These changes make life a lot easier for users. So, another quality of life upgrade. So I'm very happy to see this. I think this is pretty self-explanatory what this is, but I'll try my best to explain it. So there's now input that there's now a text box that can be brought into a lot of different things. For example, maybe a fighter is being showcased their elite level wrestling. There will now be a text box input that can show up you can describe a little bit more how this fighter has elite wrestling. So I think that's pretty cool, and there's an auto highlight for those contents to further speed up the input, which is kind of cool too. But moving on, number 70, toggle colors. By request, the game's colored text can be toggled off for users with visual impairment, or if you just don't like the colors in general. Which is a nice addition. More of a cosmetic thing here, but not really much needs to be said here other than that It's a nice addition, and I'm very happy that this is being added. I think now we're going to day 12. Yes, we are now going to day 12. So let's get into it. Number 71 is viewership figures. By popular request, viewership figures are now calculated and shown on screen and are recorded in event histories for all shows that are broadcasted, which adds an extra element of realism. I think this is great. I'm not sure what exactly this means, though. I'm not sure if this is going to be done in a similar way to how TW does it with actual like viewership and like key demographic type of deal, or if it'll just be viewership, or if it'll just be key demographic viewership, or I'm like type of deal, or I don't know what it will be, but either way, I think it's a nice addition. There's not really much else to say about that. Moving on to number 72, team coaches. Teams can now have up to 5 coaches as part of their setup. Each coach can be assigned a role, such as being the head coach, a striking coach, etc. And the quality of the coach will influence how effective the training is in conjunction with the team's inbuilt strengths. This makes teams meatier and more realistic, as well as giving something more for retired fighters to do. Previously, all that really was there is if you had a retired fighter, all that really was there was to do commentating, and basically no fighter was capable of doing any sort of commentary. But now we can give them something to do. So, for example, you could have Brock Lesnar be a coach in a team, potentially the American Top Team, as a wrestling coach, which I think would be pretty cool. For number 73, you've got fighting owners. By request, owners and CEOs can now be active fighters rather than being required to be retired or non-fighters. This allows some real-world situations to be modeled that previously couldn't be. This is kind of nice. I'm not sure if this means that the owner or CEO could also fight too, like a Jake Paul kind of deal with MVP, or what exactly is going on here. But if that's the case, then that's great. I might be. This is definitely something I'm going to be playing around with for a bit, but I'm not. But so I don't really understand this a whole lot. I know you can play as the owner or CEO as an active fighter now, but does this mean they can still fight at that at the promotion, or are they no longer able to fight? Is the thing. That's something we'll have to find out, I guess. Or if you know, anybody knows, let me know in the comments. Number 74, mandatory challengers. Each weight class in a company can now optionally be set to have a specific number of mandatory challengers. Excuse me. For example, if it's set to 5, then all the fighters ranked down to number 5 in that weight class are considered mandatory challengers. Champions cannot refuse to fight a mandatory challenger. This was a requested feature to add extra realism to the game. This is already kind of a pretty good explanation of what this means, but I'm gonna explain it a little bit more. Uh, I'm gonna give a little bit more of an example in this case. So we'll go to the U.S. We'll go to one championship. Let's say that for the bantamweight division, you want you've got, for example, Fabricio Andrade as the current bantamweight champion, and you've got, as of right now, the number one contender, John Lineker. He'd be a mandatory challenger, or Stephen Lomon is ranked number 2 at the moment, who would also be a mandatory challenger, and so on and so forth. But then there'd be some ranked fighters within the one bantamweight rankings that the champion could still refuse to fight. But it is also completely optional, which is nice. Because again, the more control, the better for every kind of player. But now let's move on to number 75, creating child companies. The user can now pay to found their own child company via the corporate part of the Office screen. This removes the need to wait for another active company to get into financial difficulty and be willing to sell up. This therefore makes things a lot smoother and more user-friendly. So very much a solid quality of life upgrade being added here. As this was very tedious in the past and very hard to do because a lot of times the companies didn't want to sell up, at least in my case. I tried to buy out other companies a lot of times, and most of the time they said no, even if they were in millions of dollars of debt for months upon months. It was a mess. But being able to do this now is great, and will as the game, as Adam Ryland already said, would make things smoother and a lot more user friendly. But now we're moving on to day 13. So the first one here is AI child companies. The AI has been significantly upgraded to make much better use of any child companies it owns, including being able to shut them down entirely if they become too much of a financial burden, and to call up / send down fighters to manage their career paths better. I don't really have much else to say about this. Number 77, child staff. The user now has the ability to appoint owners and CEOs directly to their child company rather than having to let the AI handle it. This adds a little bit more control and realism. I'm pretty happy about this one. There was a little bit of a worry at times, like when I did my while I'm I have plans to have a child company for my Infinity Fights series that I've been doing. But I can't get an owner or CEO who by myself. The game does it for me. And that's not really something I wanted to do. But if I were to transfer that over into WMMA6, I can now do so, which is kind of nice. But that's all she told for number 77. Moving on to number 78, cutting child companies loose. As we're now able to found child companies, we can now have the ability to cut loose a child company. What does cutting loose a child company mean? This means that the company would revert to becoming its own entity independently. So previously, a child company had ceased to be useful for the only option to be closing it down entirely, losing its history, its championships, etc. So that way you're not necessarily closing down the promotion, but you also don't own it anymore. And it would keep all the history, all the championships. It would be able to keep all of that. It would still be able to run shows and run like a normal promotion, which I think is pretty nice. Going to number 79 now, we've got more things going on with the child companies. There are this says by Adam Ryland for Grey Dog Software. The user now has access to a deeper set of options for dealing with child companies via their office, including, by popular request, the ability to absorb a weight class to the parent company, which therefore avoids the previous time-consuming need to manually move a lot of fighters individually to achieve the same effort. This gives a finer degree of control over how the company functions. To head off the inevitable question, no, you cannot directly do matchmaking for a child company. You can only give instructions for how you'd like certain fighters to be used by the AI. I know a few people had asked for that ability, but it's not viable and will not be part of the game. Excuse me. He says will never be part of the game. Never say never, my friend, but that is a little bit upsetting, but I kind of understand it at the same time. It's a lot that's already being added. But what we did end up getting is pretty cool as well, because this was also kind of a concern for me too, was potentially having to merge over weight classes or championships and all this other stuff. Excuse me. So I think it's nice that we're being added more options on what to do with the child company. It does suck for those that requested to directly do matchmaking, but I doubt they'll add it in. I do believe that, but never say never. Maybe something will come up. Enough people will maybe ask for it, and maybe an update comes around or something. So never say never, Adam. Never say never. And for number 80, we've got company details. By request, there is now a company details button in the office, both for the parent and any child companies. This allows a user to alter basic details about the company on the fly. Previously, a lot of these elements required the user to use the in-game editor, so this potentially saves time. I'd agree on that, but this already does a pretty good job explaining it. But I'm glad this is a potential quality of life upgrade for those that are looking to change up the details. It's kind of a quality of life upgrade, but it's mostly cosmetic because the details don't really do anything other than kind of give a display of how the company's supposed to work. So it's more of a cosmetic in my opinion, but you could argue quality of life too. And now number 81, they're bringing the on this day. This is what Adam wrote. To bring the game in line with TEW, the in-game website now has an on this day subsection. This functions exactly the way as it would in TEW, where you could view a number of categories like birthdays, because in a previous video they mentioned there will be a real world calendar now. So we'll be able to see stuff like birthdays, title changes, legendary fights, etc., and to see if anything happened on the current day in history. For example, if you're on August 12th, 2026 in game, you'll see all the things that occurred August 12th in previous years. This is purely cosmetic, but many people seemed to enjoy it. And I think it's great too, because now we'll be able to see a little bit more of what happened previously. So, like, for example, you could see maybe there's a day where you got to see the infamous John Jones and Daniel Cormier fight. Infamous or famous? I'd say famous, but infamous I think works in this case too. But either way, or we could even go Conor McGregor and Khabib as well. So I think this is a great cosmetic upgrade. Number 82, now we've got Pro Mode. A new user preference has been added, which is Pro Mode. This optionally gives a little more realism by putting a cap on how much accuracy the user will have when viewing a fighter's skill levels. In other words, even with maximum scouting, you won't see 100% accurate feedback. This is for players who prefer a little bit more realism. I personally will probably never use this, but good for those who do want to use it. I can already think of a few content creators that I know will be using WMMA6 who might use this, but I personally probably won't. Never say never, but most likely I don't think I will. For number 83, we've got weight class analysis. By request, when modifying weight classes in your office, there is now the ability to run an analysis of the potential new/altered division so that you can immediately see which of the current fighters would be able to qualify given the weight limits. You'll be able to see who currently makes the limits and who could potentially be moved up/down to do so. This makes it a lot easier to get a grasp of how the division would look and whether or not you'd need to hire more fighters. I think this is great. I definitely will be using this. But I am very excited for this. change, this upgrade. I don't even want to call it an upgrade because it's just a new feature. It's not even really an upgrade. It's just a new feature. But this is great news because of the fact that there's been a lot of times where you'd be like, well, do you think you start to kind of second guess, excuse me, if if the weight class actually is a solid division, or if the more needs to be done with it, or if less needs to be done with it, in the case of it being potentially too stacked in comparison to other weight classes in other divisions. So I think this is a very nice change, a very nice addition. And I probably will be using this a pretty decent amount, but we'll have to wait and see, I guess. Moving on, though, now to number 84. This is injury duration mails. By request, when you are mailed about an injury having happened, the likely duration is now explicitly given as part of the text. This saves the user from having to go to a different screen to look it up, and therefore a nice quality of life change that will save a lot of clicks over the course of a game. Yes, we love the quality of life changes, especially this one. I think it's great. For example, maybe a fighter breaks their hand during a fight. Maybe you want to know how long they're gone for. A lot of times you'd have to click over to the absences and see how long they're actually going to be gone. But now you don't have to do that. It'll just give us the likely duration for it. So we have more of an understanding of when the fighter will be back. So very much a nice quality of life change here. And finally, for number 85, we have the extended height range. The range of heights can be assigned to fighters has been extended, now going from 3 feet to 8 feet in order to allow for fighters at the extreme end of the spectrum, to be simulated. A little bit more of a cosmetic change here as well, but it also is nice for those people doing modern databases, trying to get some 3-foot fighters into the game, or maybe they want freaking LeBron James as an MMA fighter. I don't know. I was just coming up with something. LeBron James was the first thing that popped up in my head. Satnam Singh would be another one too. He's more known for his pro wrestling, but he used to do basketball too, I think. I'm pretty sure. But anyways, I think this is a nice change, but it's not really something that is stupendous by any means. And that about closes out days 11 through 13 of the WMMA6 Developers Journal. We've covered a ton of fight engine upgrades, smarter fouls, and a lot more features that pushes WMMA6 into a whole new level of realism. And as I said, I'm feeling way better today. Our energy's back, and we are so back. And thank you for sticking with me through this deep dive. We're moving strong into the next stretch, and the updates only get crazier from here. So stay sharp, stay focused, and remain the all-stars that you are. I'll see you guys at day 14. Peace out.